I love space. Learning how massive the universe is, hearing all the multitudes of planets and stars and galaxies that exist within it, and knowing on top of it all the whole thing keeps getting bigger, it entrances me. In reality, space exists on a scale the likes of which humanity truly cannot grasp. But for a moment, let's try. Because of the size of the universe, it is often best to describe distance in terms of light years, or the distance that light travels in a vacuum in one Earth-length year. To put numbers to it, that amounts to roughly 5.88 trillion miles in a year, or 186,000 miles every single second. At that speed, someone would go around the globe at the equator 7.5 times in 1 second. Also in 1 second, the speed of light takes us from here to the moon. A little further out, the speed of light would take us 8 minutes to get from here to the sun, which means in some churches you may be there and back before the sermon is over. And if we wanted to go from one end of our Milky Way galaxy to the other, it would take just a mere 87,400 years to do it at the speed of light. And if we wanted to get from one end of the entire observable universe to the other, it would take 93 billion years going at the speed of light. Now this may be a little wild to think about. So let me try to go a little smaller and just explain the difference between a million and a billion really quickly. If we decided we wanted to rewind time by 1 million seconds, it would take us back about 12 days, so June 9th. If we wanted to go back 1 billion seconds, it would take us back about 32 years. So I may not have made my own grand arrival in the world yet. Let's do another one. If I wanted to rewind the clock 1 million minutes, we'd go back roughly 2 years, so summer 2024. If I wanted to go back 1 billion minutes, it would take us back to the year 124 CE, as in height of the Roman Empire, year 124. So if 1 billion seconds takes us back 32 years, and 1 billion minutes takes us back over 1900 years, and 93 billion light years takes us from one end to the other of the observable universe at the speed of light, which again is 186,000 miles per second, let's just take a moment to pause this morning and consider how much we really, truly know about this world and all that's in it. Okay, math lesson over. Thank you for your patience with me there. Let's turn back to Psalm 139 for a moment, because this is where we begin to see a curious juxtaposition. Whereas with all of the size of the world around us, it seems like we know next to nothing about our world, at least in one sense. It appears from the psalm that not only does God know all of it, but perhaps God even seems to know every single thing about every single person, or at least about the author of that psalm. You may be saying, oh, come on, Hunter, we know a ton about our world. We got all this science and math and 1,000 other things, and sure, we absolutely do know a good amount. But in the big scheme of our entire universe, I think we can question how much we really know, even by looking at the oceans. We have observed less than 0.001% of the deep ocean. That is less than 1,000th of 1% of the deep ocean. And the deep ocean is not all the way on the sea floor, but it makes up 90% of the ocean water on Earth, and our Earth is 70% of ocean. So we're talking about knowing an infinitesimally small amount just about the water and what's in it. So how can we say we know a ton about our world in any totalizing sense? I'm sorry, I said I would set aside the math. So let me change it, the example a little bit. Let's think about it this way. How often have you been feeling sad or angry or anxious and you just didn't know why? How often have you been unsure what it was that made you have that bout of illness for a couple of days? How frequently do we think we have our children figured out, only for them to throw a curveball and refuse to eat the same macaroni and cheese they have been obsessed with for 3 weeks? Not a personal example at all. All of this to say, according to Psalm 139, God knows every time we sit and stand, every hair on our head, every day in our life, every good dream and wandering thought and potent realization, while we seem to be struggling each day just to figure out why we're feeling the way we are in this single moment. And while this may lead you to a sense of worry or dread that you find yourself knowing so little about yourself, it is my hope that you will see that all around us, all that God offers us, gives us the chance to learn more. And that opportunity to grow, the process to continually expand ourselves, can be one of the greatest blessings we experience if we were let ourselves fall into it authentically. So how might we do that? Frankly, there are many ways we can do so. For me, pride has been a time in different seasons of my life where I can look at the gender and sexuality norms that have shaped me and determine if those feel like they fit who I am. Sure, in some cases, the way I was raised does work for who I am, but in other cases, those ways don't. I was socialized as a man and as a cis male that fits me in a lot of ways. But specific ideas about what counts as manhood, like burying feelings and never crying, like only doing outdoor chores and calling the rest women's work, like having a color palette of my outfits that ranges from gray to beige. All of those just don't fit. And so I had to expand. I've also expanded through understanding history better. Looking at historical celebrations like Juneteenth that we just came off on Friday, as well as many different rebellions by enslaved and oppressed people worldwide, has helped me come to see that my worldview is not the only one. And that in many cases, I may be flat out wrong about what is happening in the world and what the people in the world really need. Sure, sometimes we get folks like John Brown who come and offer an example of staunch support even to the point of death from white folks. But what I've learned and continue to learn is that anti-racism work, as with any work against any oppression, is not about my own self-actualization. It's not about my improved learning, but is instead about all people being free at any cost, even if that means I have to lose the power and privilege that I have enjoyed throughout my life as a white man in America. Lastly, if I'm most honest, arguably the two ways I've expanded my understanding of myself the most is through my long-term relationship with my wife and my life with our daughter. Seeing myself in the mirror as I notice how I talk about myself and how I respond to stress or anger or sadness is challenging. Noticing my own patterns reflected through my conversations with Emma or through Jackson's responses to us or herself has been some of the most crucial, eye-opening processes of expansion I have gone through, and indeed continue to go through. And in all these cases and so many more, I'm able to notice bits of myself that I would not have otherwise. In so doing, I have opened up to who I really am and who I feel I am called to be. In short, at the risk of sounding arrogant, I think these expansive experiences help me see myself a little bit more like how God sees me. Not as a failure, not as someone who will never be enough, but as beloved, as worthy, as an integral part of God's family, just as I am. Friends, there are so many ways that we can consider expansion. For some of us, this may have to do with gender and sexuality. It could be learning more about the identities that fit under the queer umbrella that we don't often discuss, like folks who are intersex, or people who find themselves rejecting labels altogether, or being fluid in the ones that they claim. For some, it could be about the makeup of relationships and families, such as how some people honor polyamory and non-monogamy, And others claim the only way to remain holy is through a lifelong monogamous relationship, which is a debate that the denomination, the PCUSA, is having right now. For some, expansion may have to do with our habits, maybe with our vices, such as how our smartphones and social media are impacting our brains in ways we may not want to talk about, or how substances may have more power over us than we want to admit. For some, it may have to do with how we handle our feelings and our trauma, such as how we may feel tempted to downplay or ignore what we're feeling, or avoid seeking help through therapy because we want to simply tough it out, or worse, because we think we aren't worthy or deserving of the time or energy to get the healing we so desperately want and need deep down. There are 1,000 other ways we can consider expansion, and it is my hope, church, that we will take at least one of them and fall into it authentically. As we go throughout this day and this week, consider that maybe, just maybe, there is just a little, or maybe a whole heap, that we have yet to discover about ourselves and the people around us. Think about what it might mean for us to approach this reality with humility, to understand that we do not have the full picture, and to instead believe, or maybe even have faith, that our God, the one who kicked this whole universe off, who sees every part of our heart, is a God of process, a God of unfolding, a God of discovery. Contemplate what it could offer us in our lives if we took that vision of God to heart and believe that we, as people created as reflections of the Imago Dei, the image of God, that we may also have the capacity to be expansive in our own right. Friends, this morning I want us to notice that we have the opportunity each day to dig deep and expand our perception of who we are. Despite all that has been placed upon us, from media and family and friends and school curriculums and church services and everything else, despite all of that, we still have the chance to unveil so much that already exists within us. And lucky for us, our ever-expansive God knows all of this is within us, and she knew it when she made us in her image. All we really have to do to start this expansion is grab a shovel and start digging. May it be so, and amen.